if you think about who you are and what you're about, you have to go to your core essence. What is it that makes me me? What is it that drives me and motivates me? What is it that I need to do the way I need to breathe oxygen?
Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives, the work, the businesses of my network. I want to get to those great leads that can share those books that have provided great insights, that have given them great lessons for their career, for their business, for their work, whatever it may be. All those worlds intersect, whether they're the writer of the book or not. I want to know which book really has left an indelible mark on who they are. And my guest today is Jamie Turner. And Jamie is an internationally recognized motivational speaker, author, and Emory University lecturer who helps people discover a better version of themselves. His insights on leadership and business have been featured by top media outlets, including CNN, The Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. And he has been recognized globally as a top 10 speaker. In addition to driving the popular UnspokenRules.Live platform and releasing his newest book, Better, a guidebook to a new and improved you, Jamie frequently delivers keynote speeches for major brands like Coca-Cola, Mercedes-Benz, and Verizon. Outside of his professional endeavors, he is the co-founder of the global nonprofit A School Bell Rings and the proud father of 3 remarkable women. Jamie, thank you so much for sitting down for this conversation.
Yeah, great to be here. Glad to chime in and have a conversation with you about everything that we can talk about today.
So, Jamie, obviously great bio, great history, all these different companies that you've worked with and spoken to, family man, obviously I can tell. When it comes to you, the bio is great, but what does that work look like in the day-to-day? I want to kind of learn what somebody's up to, the meat of their work as it pertains to their schedule. Like what are you getting into these days and what does that look like?
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because one of the things I talk to my kids about is find your recipe for success. And all of us have a different recipe, whether it is exercise, reading, all that sort of good stuff. For me personally, I have a tendency towards hard work. It's partly one of the reasons why the opening of the book is my late wife on her deathbed telling me basically that I wasn't present in the marriage, and that was like a knife going through my heart. But what she was saying was, you were always climbing the next mountain. You were always working so hard. And I do enjoy what I do. So I've had to manage that. But my kind of recipe is meditation, which I do every single morning for 20 to 25 minutes. I sometimes do it in the afternoon, and that has actually helped me manage my ADHD, which I had growing up. And then when I started meditating, I was able to kind of manage that a little bit. In addition to the meditation, I also do exercise. So I run and or cycle. I'm now getting into cycling. Had my first tumble yesterday, which inevitably is going to happen for you. And, you know, it's the whole thing that your cleats are locked into the stirrups and all that sort of stuff. And then a few other things, which includes reflection, reading, time alone. Believe it or not, despite the fact that I'm a speaker, I am an introvert. You'll be surprised to find that most professional speakers actually are introverts. It's a weird dynamic, but that's my kind of recipe that works for me.
So aside from the speaking, what other kind of work are you delivering or what are you into? I don't know if you're writing full time. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I write books, I teach at Emory University, and then I speak. Those are the 3 primary things that I do. Teaching at Emory University is great because it keeps me present with the kids I mean, the young.
I say the same thing when I speak at universities. I call them kids, and it's like, I got to remember that. No, they're not.
It's funny. I have a friend that I teach with down there, and she keeps turning to me saying, "Don't call them kids. They're not kids anymore." I'm like, I guess you're right. But basically, the primary thing I do is the teaching, the speaking, and then the writing. And of course, the writing issue is where's writing going to go? You've got a lot of people who are not as big readers as they used to be. So a lot of my content also goes into video, and I enjoy the whole editing process on the video, which I do as a way to relax. But those are the primary things, just getting out there from a speaking point of view, from a teaching point of view, and from a writing point of view.
Jesus, man, you threw so much at me in like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, like all stuff that I want to ask about.
Well,
So,
if I can jump in on that real quickly,
yeah.
I get on TV every once in a while. I'm trained to get as
No,
much.
listen, and anybody that knows me knows I don't mean that in a bad way at all.
No, I
like,
know. Yeah.
As you were saying stuff, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
from the conversation you had with your wife to the meditation to the more and more physical health, the exercising, the introversion, being a speaker. It's funny, people don't believe that I'm an introvert based on having a video podcast that I love doing. Even when you noted in your last sentence when you said that video editing is a form of relaxation.
Yeah.
Not that that's the most important one of what you noted, but that's the most peculiar one. What is it about that for you is, I get it.
Yeah.
I do get it. But what is it about that stands out for you?
Ultimately, I'm a creative person and I enjoy the creative process. There is something for all of us who are creators, and you're a creator as well, where there is a certain sense of pride and accomplishment when you've created something out of basically nothing. And so that's a lot of fun. My challenge on that front is, where do I stop? Because I'll get into editing even a 60-second video, and I'm dropping in, B-roll footage, things like that, and doing these minor tweaks that nobody's going to notice other than me, but I still do them. So it's just a fun creative outlet for me. And I just have done it for many, many years now, and I always have enjoyed it.
So Jamie, in order to learn a little more about the person that's in front of us that wants to share their book with us, meaning me and the audience, can you tell me about your life? Like, what was your path to now from, say, high school age, going into the workforce or college, whatever your path may have been? If you could kind of give me, the pivots, the turns, the high points, low points, whatever there may be, what did that path look like to now?
Yeah, there are a couple of pivotal things, because I've reflected a little bit on this, as we all do as we get older, is just sort of what made me me. And there were a couple of key things in my life. First of all, I had ADHD. So anybody who's neurodivergent knows that that's something that can be managed. I manage it through meditation. I have also been open to the idea of medication to manage ADHD, and whatever works for every individual is just what works for them. But that dictated my life to a certain degree, because I struggled with focus. And one of the little aspects of ADHD is that you also don't have a very good memory. Without getting into the science of it too much, you're basically, generally speaking, what the latest science is telling us about ADHD is that we might have a lower than average level of dopamine going on in our brain. And so we actually introduce new stimuli in order to bump up that dopamine level. But that was a pivotal thing for my life, because I was always a hard worker and interested in success at school, but struggled. I remember one time going home from high school, and I had a pile of books, and I bumped into some friends, and they were all smart. They were A students, and I was a B student at best. And they said, why so many books? I'm like, don't you guys have to have this many books? Don't you take this many books home at night? And they were like, no, we don't. We just, read it in the class and we're fine. So ADHD was a big part of my life, and I struggled and worked with that. How about you? I'm just curious, from your perspective, what are the things that you've worked through in your life that have helped you as you go through this journey?
Very interesting. It's interesting you mentioned ADHD. My son has it. Mm-hmm. So my wife is looking at me like, gee, I wonder where that came from. So, but I don't have a formal diagnosis, but I'm going to go just to find out if I do. And it would make sense that I do, just based off what I've heard, what I've read, what friends have described that have experienced it, lived with it, what you just shared about those dopamine hits. Like that's just when I started hearing about the nature of dopamine hits as it relates to ADHD, that's the one that really stands out.
Mm.
Um, but in terms of, yeah, with me, it's always been anxiety in my life
Hmm.
has
Hmm.
driven me
Hmm.
because I got to the point where instead of being relatively still in my life and being anxious, I got to the point where I started stepping out of myself a little more and being creative.
Hmm.
So for me, I do subscribe. I do use that vernacular that where it is this kind of energy that is in my body and just kind of needs to escape in one form or another. And if I don't utilize whatever form I may need in that moment, whether it's spiritual, emotional, physical, whatever it may be, creatively, I got a bass guitar, drum kit behind me, obviously books, writing. So there's always outlets that I can channel to get rid of it. It's just a part of me. I try not to say coping with it, but it is really living with it. So it is one of those experiences in life, much like ADHD, where at first you may see it as a disadvantage, as a hindrance, as a defect. But then you get to the point where if you channel it properly and know where your boundaries are and where it can take you, if you look at it differently than what is purported and what is told to you, I mean, the sky's the limit. So the creativity, that's why I asked you about editing, Jamie. The creativity, I get that. There's nothing for me more satisfying than finalizing an episode, sending it to you all, saying, this is what we came up with.
Yeah.
This is what we designed together. Like you have your specialty, I have my specialty, your personality, my personality. But this is what we did. Whether it's an hour and a half, this is what we created. So channeling all that creativity has helped me. And that's the source of it, I believe. No formal diagnoses, but just based on everything that I've seen, I believe that I've dealt with all that, and that's how I channel it. So I appreciate anytime there's a mention of creativity and really channeling, who someone is into their art form, whatever it may be.
Have you ever done EFT tapping for anxiety relief?
I've heard of it and never done it.
It's check it out online. If you just go to YouTube, you'll find videos on it. There's one in particular by somebody from I think New Zealand, and she just walks you through a 15-minute exercise. But basically, EFT tapping, for people who are vaguely familiar with it, is called emotional freedom technique, and it is used to help soldiers with PTSD reduce their anxiety. And effectively, I think what it does neurologically is it just draws your attention to the present moment and the now, and then you feel a little bit safer. Where we get wound up, and we all do, in particular with social media and the news environment that we have, is we're watching all these disasters go on around the world when, from an evolutionary standpoint, we were really designed to focus on our little area.
Exactly.
And when we start introducing all this other stuff, it gets anxiety produced. So check it out. It has helped reduce PTSD in certain people by 50%. For soldiers that have had trauma in their lives. So definitely worth checking out and trying every once in a while.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mention being present in the here and now. The moments when they come and I am in that present moment, in that here and now, especially with photography. If I would go off with my camera just driving around all day, stopping and taking pictures, that was like the only thing that stands out up until then that I got lost in. Where I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking about the future. I wasn't thinking about anything that might be going on. I just got lost in the moment. So when people hear be present, be in the here and now, I think you hear it so much that it kind of loses its steam. It loses its value.
Yeah.
And there's just no way to explain it to you until you've felt both sides of that coin of being somewhere else and being in the moment. When I've gotten to those moments where I am really there and just there, I just stop for a minute. I'm like, wow, so this is what it feels like.
Yeah. If you think about, what causes stress and anxiety, it is anxiousness about the future and regret about the past. And when you're in the present, you're not focused on the future or the past. You're just in the present moment. And I speak about that as though I'm good at it. I'm not good at it. I'm
Yeah.
totally always looking over the next mountain and, what am I going to climb and where am I going to go next and all that sort of stuff. And so when my late wife turned to me, as I mentioned, on her deathbed and said, "You weren't present in our marriage," that was a pretty big deal and something that was transformative in a way to help me go, okay, if that's one of the last things she's going to say to me, then I better pay attention to it. And it hurt, but I also think that she was trying to do me a favor and say, don't do this next time. Next time you have an important person in your life, stay present, stay in the moment. And that's what the journey has been for the time since she passed away, to try to learn how to do that.
Jamie, did she, I mean, getting personal for a bit, but it's just because I'm curious about who you are and the way that you learn and the experiences that you've had. Was that the first kind of mention from her about that? I mean, did it really catch you? Did it blindside you?
It did blindside me, and I write about it in the introduction in the book. The book starts with, the doctors had given my wife Dana 24 to 48 hours to live, so we knew it was coming to an end. She had cancer, and the what had happened. In the book I say it blindsided me, and I also say she probably said it to me previously. I just didn't pick up on it.
Yeah.
So I do want to give her credit for probably having communicated that, but the flip side is it was really a knock between the eyes, and it really kind of woke me up and said, okay, I really need to be focusing on this and paying attention to it.
So out of curiosity, and if I'm going too deep, please just let me know. I don't mean to be
No,
intrusive
this
or
is all
anything
good.
like
It's
that.
all in the book.
So what did you learn or what in your habits? Because I can tell based on your health practices, your meditation, how seriously you take being in the here and now, practicing yourself. But you've used language where it's kind of like your boundaries. You just said it. Listen, doesn't mean I have it all together 100% of the time. But how did that change you going forward after that conversation? What kind of changes did you make to the way you lived? And obviously the relationship with your daughters.
To be honest with you, it's hard for me to practice that. And I have techniques that I do in order to try to do a better job at it. But one of the reasons I write, one of the reasons I teach, one of the reasons I speak is because it helps remind me of a roadmap on how to have good mind, body, spirit health. And so if the ultimate goal for all of us, and let's back up for a second. What is the ultimate goal of life? The ultimate goal of life is to evolve spiritually, to grow as a human being, and to deepen your relationship with the universe, with God, with whatever you want to call it. And so if that's our ultimate goal, then we need to figure out who we are in that space and figure out how we're going to accomplish what we need to accomplish. If we have one of the things I talk about in the book is we all have an aspiration line. An aspiration line is that version of ourselves that's the best version of ourselves. We're smarter, we're healthier, we're calmer, we're, less anxious, we're thinner, we're happier, all that sort of stuff. And if that's what we're shooting for, we need a roadmap to help us get there. So if the goal in life is to get to that aspiration line and to reach it, which, by the way, we never do reach it ultimately. We strive to reach it, but we don't get there. Then what do we do in order to accomplish that? And everybody listening to this right now has an awareness of what their recipe is. And it might be, for me, as I mentioned, it's meditation, it's exercise, sunlight in the summer, and vitamin D in the winter, and all sorts of different things that I do in order to have that mind, body, spirit perform at its peak.
Yeah.
Everybody listening to this right now has their own recipe, but you've got to tweak it as you go along and figure out what's working, what's not working, in order to bring you to that place of peace and perspective so that you ultimately can perform at your peak and reach that aspiration line, or at least strive to reach the aspiration line that you're looking for.
Yeah, I love the way you put that, where everybody has to have their own process, their own recipe. you can listen to coaches, you can listen to speakers, something might resonate in what they say, but very rarely is anything they say going to wholly, completely work for you. It's always like trial and error, which, you know, at this late stage in my life, I appreciate the trial and error because it's a form of creativity. It's a form of experimentation and trying new things. Now, Jamie, for you, ADHD, obviously the science on that, the name given to it, how serious it's been taken. When did you realize that that was the case for you, that that's how you were living, that that's how you were processing things around you? What was your experience with it? Yeah, I mean, as a kid into school, into college, whatever it may be, can you give me some kind of
Sure.
some examples of just what your life was like as a younger person coming up, trying to figure themselves out and their work and what their life was going to look like?
Couple of things. One was in college, I remember studying for an exam and I was reading, I think in astronomy, a list of things, a list of 10 items that related to astronomy. And I'm reading them out loud. And my college roommate in the other room hollers out because I'm reading them out loud to myself over and over and over again. And my college roommate yells out, "Dude, I know the list now. Surely you've got to know it too." Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was sort of an indicator. Again, ADHD plays with your memory because sometimes you don't have as good a memory, which I didn't. That was kind of a first signal. And then when I was running my company, my first company, I was in a status meeting and I was bouncing off the walls, doing tangential thinking and comments and all this sort of stuff. And I had a friend who sat in one of our status meetings. I forget why he was there. But after the meeting, he came up to me and he said, "Are all your meetings like that?" And I said, "Yeah, what do you mean?" And he said, I was struggling to follow along. I mean, that's the way you run meetings? And I went, "Yeah, is that wrong?" And he was like, "Well, I mean, seems like it would be hard to follow along." So that's when I went into a counselor and I said, "Hey, I think I've got ADHD pretty severely and my employees are struggling to keep up with me and I'm thinking they're following along and they're not." And I said, "Can you put me on medicine?" And he said, "I can put you on medicine, but you'll be on a medicine the rest of your life. Have you ever tried meditation?" And I said, "Well, actually, I do meditate, but just occasionally." He said, "Well, what I want you to do is do it twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening." And what I did was I did it in the morning after breakfast and I did it midday after lunch. So it was built into my schedule. If we know that we can brush our teeth every morning and have a cup of coffee every morning or eat lunch every afternoon, then we can also build in 15 minutes for the meditation. Everything changed. Everything changed. My whole life transformed by doing that. And the way it transformed was I was able to focus. My health got better. I believe my eyesight even got better. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seemed to get better. Again, my ability to have a conversation with people and stay on task got better. One of the things that happens with people with ADHD is you're saying something to somebody, a new thought enters your mind, and because you can't hold on to that thought, you introduce that thought in mid-sentence into the conversation, and the person you're talking to is going, "What? What does baseball have to do with pigeons?" And in your brain, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
In their brain, they're going, "Whoa, we just took a left turn there and I have no clue where this thing is going." So my ability to hold a thought out here and say, "Okay, I'm going to come back to that later," improved. And that just improved my ability to communicate with people and my ability to lead teams and my ability to lead myself all improved as a result of the meditation, managing my ADHD.
So, Jamie, obviously knowing life before that, knowing life after that, knowing the specialization that you have now, and just the words of life and maturity and kind of growth and all that, being on both sides of that before meditation and after, how do you explain why the meditation works? I'm not going to hold you to a scientific explanation. What took place inside of you with those meditations? How would you explain that?
Yeah, my understanding of the way it works for me is there's two parts of the brain that we talk about a lot. One is the amygdala, which is at the base of your skull. The amygdala handles the four F's, which are fight. The second F
Flight.
is flight. The third F is food. And the fourth F is procreation. And then, which if you think about what that means, then
Yeah.
and so that is basically our reptilian brain, and it's an
Yep.
impulsive brain, part of the brain that is an important part of our brain. We manage those impulses through the prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain. And when I meditate, it activates the prefrontal cortex more so that I can manage those impulses and actually sort of plan ahead and think ahead and not necessarily always be acting on impulse. So that's my understanding of the way it works. The practical application, very simple. I sit down, I breathe in through my nose, I breathe out through my mouth. When I do that, that is a count of 1. And then I do it again. I breathe in through my nose and I breathe out through my mouth, and that's a count of 2. And then when I get to 10, I go back to 1 again. And that you're going to say, well, wait, it's got to be more complex than that. No, it's not. And what happens if your listeners do this for 2.5 weeks, at the end of 2.5 weeks, and they do it for 15 minutes each time, at the end of 2.5 weeks, what's going to happen is they're going to feel something. It's going to be a very nuanced feeling. And they're going to think, I wonder if that's what that guy, Jamie Turner, was talking about. It is a feeling of connectedness, of peace, and mostly of understanding, the same kind of peace and understanding you might get if you're a spiritual person and you just get a sense of it's all going to be okay. And the result is that it helps you move through the world more easily and more fluidly and more calmly. So it's an important practice for me in a nutshell, because if I don't do it, I get anxious, I get agitated, I get impulsive. When I do it, I find that I'm just a better human being for myself and for those around me. So it's an important process for me, and it's as simple, literally, as counting your breaths and doing that for 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, if you can do that. And then ultimately, you're going to feel this sense that's called the alpha state, and the alpha state just is that state of connectedness and peace and thoughtfulness that you actually experience as a result of meditating.
I would love to dive into that, the process and your learning of that process. Are there any, just so we can move on with the conversation and I don't keep you here all day, are there any resources that you went to or you could guide people to, whether it's online or a book, something that stands out that helped you with that process? Even though you say it is very simple, are there any other kind of supplemental resources you would guide people towards?
Yeah, definitely. And by the way, we're talking about the most important thing in life, which is getting your mind settled in and focused. So I could spend the whole day talking about this because it's that relevant. When you change your mind, you change your actions. And when you change your actions, you change the outcomes in your life. So the starting point for everything is to work on the mindset. And when you get that fixed, a lot of other things fall into place. So I can't encourage us enough, all of your listeners, to say, okay, if I work on my mindset, then that'll change my actions, and my actions will ultimately change the outcomes in my life. So the short answer to your question is, when I talk about meditation, I explain it. Hey, you can just count your breaths and do it for 2.5 weeks. Twice a day, even if it's just 10 minutes each time, you'll be fine and you'll sense this thing. But actually, there's an organization that does a great job with it, which I shifted over from what I had been doing, which was transcendental meditation, works perfectly good. And then I shifted over to something called heartfulness. Heartfulness uses some of the same techniques, but it focuses your attention on the heart, which is a channel to whatever the universe is. And that is actually done for free. They actually have people who will sit with you as often as you like, and you can do it online. But if you just go to heartfulness.org and look up the meditation practice of heartfulness, then they will set you up. And it's free. They never charge anybody for anything. And they're not allowed to, but they are dedicated to teaching this practice to people around the globe. That's what they do.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
All right. So back to little Jamie walking with all his books, and his buddies were saying, no, we do in class. So education wise or workforce wise? What was your path from there?
Well, there was another event in my life that resulted in who I am today. And that event happened on the playground, probably fourth grade. And we were playing dodgeball. And there was the teams were divided between the good and the bad, meaning the good athletes versus the bad athletes. And I was on the bad athlete side. And that pissed me off to no end. Not because I was angry that I wasn't a good athlete. I was pissed off that these jerks were saying, y'all are bad and we're good. And I really, 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 that just sort of planted a seed in me of supporting the underdog, learning how to accomplish what you can with what you've been given, and really being frustrated with anybody who has an ounce of arrogance in them, because that's what I was experiencing at the time. And that kind of triggered me and said, okay, I'm going to take what I've been given for all the good and all the bad that I've been given, and I'm going to do the best I can with it. And that's been my journey through my entire life, which is what Better, a Guidebook to a New and Improved You is all about. It's like these techniques you can use in order to become the best version of yourself. And it provides you a roadmap on how to get there. A lot of us want to get there, but we just don't have a roadmap. And that's what the book does, is it says, hey, here's a roadmap on how you can take what you've been given in your mind, body, spirit, and use it as a great way to improve your life and improve your self-leadership as much as you improve your ability to lead others.
So go on. I want to hear more about your journey though, because I want to really build up and see how the person was shaped that decided, okay, I want to put this together. So from that moment on, what does that look like?
Another turning point for me was I was creating posters for a friend of mine who was running for eighth grade president. And he'd asked me to create posters for him. And my father, who was a great guy, I loved him a lot. And he looked over at me and he said, what are you doing? I said, making posters for my friend who's running for student body president. And he said, well, if you're making them for him, why wouldn't you just make them for yourself? And that got me going. I was like, why wouldn't, what the heck am I doing? Why am I helping this guy win an election? And so that got me involved in student politics, which I got into in high school and continued in college as well.
It's incredible how all it takes is one question.
Yeah.
Always, being a father now of 3 kids myself, how I respect it more. Comments, questions, because I know like one little instance in somebody's tone, their voice, their words can kind of change which way you see things. So it's incredible that one little question that he turned to you and just happened to ask, he happened to see what you were doing. And I mean, I can imagine something like that set you on this path to get to where you are now. It changed your thinking.
Well, it's interesting because he said something else to my college roommate that changed my college roommate's life in the same way. My college roommate grew up in the deep, deep southern part of Texas, a very traditional, old school kind of part of Texas. And he grew up in an environment where people were less than kind to immigrants. And he said something mildly disparaging about that demographic, nothing overt, but just mildly disparaging. And my father was talking to my college roommate at the time, and all he said was, "What makes you say that?"
Yeah.
And that little comment, that little thing changed my college roommate's life, because he thought, what does make me say that? Why would I be disparaging to other human beings who are just trying to live a life? And so all it was that little comment, what makes you say that? And then it made him reflect and think, why am I saying that? And it changed his life, and it turned things to a different direction for him, where he decided, all right, I'm going to be more generous, more thoughtful, more kind, more open-minded. And understand that at the end of the day, we're all just humans trying to work through a messy life and make the best of it. And they're every bit as human as I am. So yeah, those little comments or those little questions can change people's lives.
What did you go to school for, Jamie?
Yeah, I studied marketing and advertising and went to school at the University of Texas and went up to New York City, worked there for a while, and then came down to Atlanta, which is where I am now, north of Atlanta. You can see over my shoulder there's a lake behind me, but I drive in to teach at Emory, where I teach marketing there as well. So a fun journey on all of that side of the equation too.
So when you talked about before the first company you started, can you tell me a little bit about, I mean, it sounds like there were a couple or various. What did that look like in terms of launching your own thing?
Yeah, actually, this will be something that might be relevant for your viewers and listeners as well. I had always wanted to start my own business, and I think it came from watching some members of my family. We were all very entrepreneurial, and also my dad once turned to me and said, and he ran a division of a company, and he said, "I have a former employee who went out on his own about a year ago, and now he's making as much money as I am." And I thought, well, that's not a bad thing. I think maybe I'll try to be an entrepreneur and give it a shot. So when I was in my late 20s, I started my first marketing firm. But here's what's interesting about it. I went out. I had decided I had been laid off from a marketing firm, and they had given me severance, which was 2.5 months. You wouldn't get 2.5 months in today's world, but at the time, I got 2.5 months severance. Um, I thought, all right, if I'm ever going to start my own agency right now, it would be now, because I've got 2.5 months of a runway where it can kick things off. And by the way, at the time I had my first child in a crib at home.
Wow.
And I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to do it. I went to my father for all the good things he said to me. And I said, Dad, I think I might start an agency. And he said, I don't think you're ready yet. And then I went to my boss and I said, hey, I think I might start an agency. And she said, you're not ready. And then I went to my older brother. Actually, I bumped into my older brother. And let me pause here for a second. I've now had two people say, don't do it. I had a job offer from an agency that said, we want to hire you. And I thought, I'm either going to start my own company right now and turn down this job offer, or I am going to jump on board with this other company and then, be working for another person the rest of my career. And I thought, okay, I'm going to turn down the other company. I turned it down. That night, literally the night that I turned it down, I bumped into my older brother who said, hey, I heard that you're thinking of turning down that job offer. And I said, yes. And he said, please tell me you didn't turn it down. And I lied to him and said, I haven't turned it down. And he said, thank God, because I'm telling you right now, if you turn that job down and you try to start your own marketing firm, I'm telling you right now that you are going to fail. And when you do, I will be the person that comes to you and says, I told you so. So I didn't have the nerve to tell him, yeah, well, actually, I did turn it down today. But I did have all the inspiration I needed to start the agency and start the marketing firm and not fail, because I had three very important people in my life tell me, you're not going to make it. So I was going to work around the clock in order to make it work. And I did work around the clock, and it did work. And so I started it, and we were off to the races after that.
So why did you do that? Not that you have to listen to anybody telling you not to do it. Not that you have to listen to three people in your life the way these three people are based on their positions in your life. But where do you think that comes from, where you did have your dad, your boss, your brother, all these people saying this, and you chose to do it anyway?
Yeah. And the way I describe that, I'll answer that question, but the way I describe it is you have to be a little bit crazy to go start your own business. It is because theoretically 9 out of 10 businesses fail within 5 years. And so think about it this way. It's the equivalent of having a parachute on your back and standing at the door of the airplane. And there's a 9 out of 10 chance that the chute won't open, and you still jump. That's how crazy you have to be in order to do it. Now, some of us do it out of necessity, and that's great. And I was sort of maybe doing it out of necessity. But to me, what it was I don't like other people telling me what to do. It's part of my personality. And I just like to call the shots and do it my way. And I would rather call the shots and be wrong than to have somebody else tell me go do this and know that, I don't see it that way. I don't think that's the way we
Yeah.
should do this. So it was literally something inside of me that just naturally doesn't like to be told what to do, and for better or worse.
Yeah. So Jamie, obviously you said your first company, you had sold that. Is that the company in question? And then what happened after that?
Yeah, we actually merged in with another company, which is a polite way of saying we didn't make it. We made it 10 years, which was a great run. And if you think about like the restaurant industry, if a restaurant lasts 10 years, the restaurant on the street corner that, down the street from your house, that's a pretty good run.
Yeah.
And we had a great run. And we were one of the best creative firms in the city of Atlanta at the time. We won all sorts of awards and accolades. And then what ended up happening, unfortunately, and I'll not to get into the weeds too much, but we basically had 9/11 happen, and that tanked all budgets, and budgets
Yeah.
were cut very quickly from everybody. And I made the mistake of saying, no, these employees have been with me through thick and thin. I'm going to stick it out with them. I'm not going to lay anybody off. I should have laid people off, and I didn't. And I said, no, we're going to stick it out. And we dug a hole that we couldn't get out of. So ultimately, I was a quote unquote acquired by another marketing firm, which was really just a way for us to land with my remaining employees and my remaining accounts in a place that was a safe landing for us. But a
And
good
then,
10-year run while we were at it.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then from there?
I did that, and then went out, basically landed at another company, worked with them, had an idea for, I was driving along one day and the phrase 60-second marketer popped in my head. I have no clue where it came from. And there was just a ring to it. And I went to the owners of the company. I said, we're a marketing firm. Can I start a blog called The 60-Second Marketer? And they said, yeah, let's give it a try, see what happens with it. And originally it was designed to draw attention to the parent company. It ultimately drew more attention to me, and to their credit, and I really appreciate it. I went to them and I said, do you mind if I spin off and just take this little thing called the 60-Second Marketer and go run with it? And that, to their credit, they were like, yeah, not a problem. So I left them. And by the way, can I borrow some office space while I do this? Because you've got a few spare offices. I can't believe I had the cojones to say this and run with it. And by the way, can I borrow office space for free? And
How old were you at that point?
I was in my 40s. And so they were kind enough to say, yeah, we've got spare office space. When we need it, we got to kick you out, but we appreciate having
That's incredible.
your energy here. Yeah. So that worked out great. And that ended up, that was at a time when blogging got me visibility around the globe. And suddenly people started calling me up and saying, we'd like you to speak everywhere. And so I got to see the world on other people's dime and got paid for it. So I'd been all through Europe, all through the Middle East, all through Latin America, and have just had a fun ride as a result of it. And so that was a big turning point, because I took the risk and said, I'm going to go out on my own and do this. And then it resulted in books, TV appearances, speaking engagements, things like that.
Incredible. So Jamie, obviously we delved into your childhood, just the tip of that iceberg.
All good. Yeah.
But how does your childhood come through in who you are today? How does that show up in the work you do today? How do you reconcile what you're doing today to who you were as a kid?
I was traditionally an optimist as a kid, but it was the result of trauma. And the trauma was I had a wonderful mom who self-medicated with alcohol. So I grew up in a family with an alcoholic parent, and that creates all sorts of dynamics in yourself that you have to work through as an older adult. One of which is the world doesn't seem safe because you have one of your parents who is present sometimes and not present at other times. And so you go through life sort of feeling like, oh, it's shaky ground here. So my journey has always been working on how to feel stable and comfortable despite the chaos and the messiness of everyday life. And that's been an ongoing journey that I continue to work on today. And that's why I meditate and things like that, because it helps me feel centered and safe and things like that. But it also resulted in me ultimately being somewhat of an optimist. At one of the worst moments in my life during my mother's, God bless her, but during the chaos that she kind of brought to the table, I ended up deciding, okay, I got two choices. I can either let this bring me down, or I can use it as something that makes me stronger. And I chose to use it to make myself stronger. And so it gave me the ability to, in spite of the messiness of life, look at the bright side of things, perhaps to a fault. And I've kind of had to reel that in a little bit and go, yeah, sometimes things actually do just suck. And you just got to, be okay with that.
Listen, I love you bringing that up. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. That's
I'll jump
great.
back in. I'll jump
Yeah.
back in.
Well, and I was just saying, that idea of you can be overly optimistic, and sometimes things are just being more realistic about things is probably a healthier and better way to
Yeah.
lead life.
So where do you think that came from in you to kind of, when you say that you kind of had to make a decision with your mom's behavior or lifestyle, to decide whether it was going to kind of drag you down or you were going to go the other way? How old were you around that time?
I was in 7th grade. My mom had gotten into yet another wreck in her car. And I heard about it, broke out in tears, went running upstairs, buried my face in a pillow, was crying, and then went, you know what? I guess I got two choices. I can either let this bring me down, or use it as a thing to, sort of force me to look at good things that go on in my life. Cause there were a lot of amazing, wonderful things. And I had a lot of privilege in my life, which I am grateful for. But I also said, okay, I just need to take what's going on here, which is not good, and try to be the best and happiest person I can possibly be in the moment. And again, that gets into, you can overdo that to a certain degree. A good counselor of mine who was amazing said, sometimes what saves us is in our childhood destroys us as an adult. And his point was, it was great you use that optimism in your childhood, wonderful, but that can also destroy you as an adult if you let it get to you. And so that's the stuff that we're working on.
So you've talked about how when later in life, when people were telling you shouldn't start your business, you didn't want anybody to tell you what to do. So that's kind of like a hard-headedness, a stubbornness, a resilience of sorts. But where do you think that mindset in you when you were around 12 years old, 7th grade, where you kind of made that decision, where do you think that came in terms of that decision that you made? Was it kind of like modeled for you by somebody else that maybe unintentionally by them, but you just saw their behavior, maybe your dad? Where did that, at that age, where does that kind of decision, that steadfastness that I'm going to make this decision, where does that come from?
It's a great question. I don't have the answer. I do have a story that relates to that I'll come back to in a second. That was an epiphany I had about the same time. But I don't know if it was, what's that phrase? Necessity is the source of all. There's some phrase that basically says, when you confront challenges, it's the source of innovation in your life, and you solve problems in fresh new ways when you are going through difficulty.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those moments where I was just, my brain was just going, okay, how am I going to deal with this? And it decided, okay, I'm going to deal with it this way. There was another thing that happened in my life, and this goes back to meditation. At the same time all of this was going on, my older brother and older sister were smoking a lot of pot. And I remember at the time thinking, what are they trying to do? Like, what is it that they're doing when they do that? And I thought, you know what they're doing? They're trying to change their mind. They're trying to change their experience in some way, shape, and form. And I thought about it. I was like, well, it doesn't seem to be working for them because my sister in particular was having some struggles and stuff like that. And I thought, well, this is not a good thing. They keep trying pot, but it doesn't seem to be helping anything. And then I thought, well, I wonder if you're going to try to change your state, your mental state, what are some healthier alternatives to that would accomplish the same thing? That's where I came across meditation. And I went in and found out that, oh, there's this thing called, at the time, I've talked about heartfulness, which is my current form of meditation. But at the time, there was something called transcendental meditation, which still is around. And I went to my parents and I said, hey, can we try this thing called transcendental meditation? And they were like, yeah, let's give it a shot. So they carted the family down, said, let's all try this together. We did it. I started doing it and did it daily for a little while. I wish I'd stuck with it at the time. It would have solved a lot of the ADHD issues, but then ultimately went over and stopped doing it other than occasionally. And then that's when I went into the doctor when I was in my mid-30s and said, hey, I got ADHD, I think, and can you put me on medicine? And he said, well, try meditation instead. And I went back to doing meditation, and that, again, changed everything for me.
Yeah, the what I was going to mention before was I love that you said that sometimes things just suck.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that toxic positivity of, no, I can make this work. I can make this work. I can make this work. It's like, yeah, do your due diligence, put in your effort, but realize where that balance of overextension versus good effort, where that point is. Because I think in my life, when in living with my anxiety, if there were actually things that were happening and it wasn't in my head, I wasn't making them up or worried about them, but things that actually played out along the course of life, when I got to the point, it's like, all right, it is what it is. It's not that I don't care, but there's nothing that I can do about it. There's like that kind of stoicism about it where I can only control so much. There are pieces that I can control. The rest I can't control. If I did my best, the 4 agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, then what can I be upset about? But it's interesting along those lines that sometimes things just suck.
Yeah.
And the biggest stressor is trying to pretend they don't suck. So you're spinning all the plates look how beautiful everything. It's like sometimes those fucking plates just need to fall.
Yeah, totally.
They're just not doing anybody any favors. Life is not supposed to be perfectly beautiful. There can be chaos. So I appreciate that you just kind of said, sometimes things just suck. And the biggest hurdles that I've dealt with in my life was trying to turn away from that or make them not suck when there was no, you couldn't retrieve anything. It was irrecoverable. It just didn't work out. So just being honest with yourself and realizing I did the best I could. Nothing's going to change. I just have to realize this just sucks. It is what it is. Now I can take that energy and use it for better purposes.
Giving yourself grace is one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself. And I love the idea that you're saying, yeah, the energy it takes to put on a bright face in the face of anxiety or depression or anything like that is a real struggle for everybody. And my oldest daughter just lost her job, then lost her girlfriend, then lost her dog to cancer, all in about 2 months. And the old me would have said, oh, come on, this is, you'll be better.
Yeah.
The new me is, hey, this sucks. This is bad. You're going through a bad streak and it's unfortunate. And you'll get to the other side of this because you're resilient, but just give yourself some grace. Cry when you need to cry, be angry when you need to be angry, be frustrated when you need to be frustrated. And even, ask why, why me? And she did all of those things. What's interesting is it actually brought her closer to, a higher power in terms of leaning into that and just saying, this is the only thing I can do in terms of getting through this, is just sort of letting go and realizing sometimes things do just suck.
Yeah. Jamie, thank you so much for sharing all of that about your life. Before we jump into the book, 2 more questions. What do you consider your superpower?
Probably connecting with people, and uh, understanding getting inside the minds of other people and understanding where they're coming from and being empathetic about that. So probably empathy, and communication skills are probably two of the bigger things that I can do that are better than most people.
And then before we dive into the book, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, as a leadership coach, what does leadership mean to you? What does good leadership look like?
To me, it means self-leadership. It starts with self-leadership, which actually starts with self-awareness and being aware of who you are and what you're about and how you engage with the world around you. And then using that awareness in order to improve the way you lead yourself. And self-leadership is trying to instill a sense of discipline to get your recipe in order, whatever that is, and then stick to it within reason, knowing that you're going to give yourself a break every once in a while. And that's fine, and that's normal, and that's human, and that actually helps you improve your ability to continue and stay on the recipe when you do give yourself a break. If you're only eating lettuce all day long, every once in a while you need a slice of pizza, and you got to give yourself that slice of pizza. So it's that is what leadership starts with self-awareness. And then it starts with self-leadership, about discipline, about what your recipe is. And then it leads to how you engage with the people in your life, whether it's at home or at work. Either one of those things is important in terms of connecting with people and understanding them to a level where they lean into you and you lean into them, to improve the way the two of you or you and your group go through life together.
Beautiful. Thank you. So yeah, Jamie, at this point, why don't we dive into your book? If you want, just mention the book's name again. I mentioned it a few times, but just to kind of remind people, and then just how the book came to be. Like, what was it that got you thinking about the book? Was there a moment? How did the book come to be?
Yeah, the book's called Better, a Guidebook to a New and Improved You, and it's for people who want to change their outcomes in their lives. And it teaches you a roadmap on how to make things change in your life, knowing that, again, we can't control all of the outcomes in our life, but we can control how we think and how we act. And by controlling those two things, we can improve the outcomes. The reason you can't fully change all of the outcomes is there's too many variables. There's life, there's things that happen that are outside of your control, but the two things you can control are your thoughts and your actions. So it goes through the 4 M's, which is mindset, which is, of course, how do you think about the world around you? Mentoring, which is how do you engage one-on-one with people? Management, which is how do you engage one-to-many? And then the 4th M is marketing, which is basically how do you have a personal brand so that you carry yourself properly, bring yourself into the world in the best way possible. So those 4 M's are the roadmap that you can use in order to achieve what you want out of life at work or at home.
So when did it hit you to, obviously you were writing, you were blogging. When did it hit you to actually put this together? Even the mindset for the book, like in coming up with the book, what did it look like in terms of when you started thinking about it and how you wanted to craft it?
It started actually many years ago. I was working with a team at a company, and there was a young employee named Thomas, and Thomas grew up in tough circumstances, where his dad wasn't part of the family and his mom worked 2 jobs and all that sort of stuff. But Thomas was very ambitious and wanted to accomplish things in his life. And he came to me one day, he said, how do I reach my aspiration line? How do I get there? And he said, I read all the books, I do all the stuff, tell me but I want to know the inside story. And I said, I'll tell you the inside story, but I'm going to tell you things that the HR department would kick me out of here if they knew I was telling you. But these are the things that you are not going to learn in an HR manual or in a typical book. And I said, these are actually the unspoken rules of leadership. These are the things that you do, that you learn through experience, through wisdom, through somebody coaching you. that they whisper in your ear. And so that was the starting point for what I developed, called a platform called the Unspoken Rules of Leadership. And it was all designed to say, here's the stuff that they don't tell you in the HR manual or in typical books. And so that went on, and I developed a whole platform around it. And as I started developing that, it resulted in speeches. And I ended up with 400 slides for, I don't use all 400 in any given thing, but if somebody comes in and says, our team needs to work on communication skills, well, I've got 70 slides on that. Our team needs to work on mindset skills. Well, I've got 40 slides on that. Our team needs to work on productivity. Well, I've got 37 slides on that. And so all of that was in there. And I thought, well, I'm going to take all of these tools, tips, and techniques, put them into a book that's easy to read, and it's specifically designed to be breezy, quick, gets to the point. You can flip through it. I've had people come back to me and say, you know what? I put the book aside, and then I'll sit down next to where I put the book aside, and I'll read a few more pages. And it just gives you these kind of tools in order to improve the outcomes in your life, but definitely not a big, thick, heavy, dense book as much as a book with lots of illustrations, lots of charts, lots of graphs, lots of quizzes, things like that you can do to stay engaged with it. It's almost more of again, part of the reason we called it a guidebook is it's meant to be interactive in nature and not passive in nature.
Jamie, so when it comes to Thomas coming to you and asking about what's behind the curtain, how do you make the sauce, right? In speaking to those unspoken, that unspoken understanding, maybe things that you saw, that is kind of like a launching point to get to this book. But in terms of your experience, were you already thinking about those things that were behind the curtain versus what people saw? How did you get in that mindset of really kind of building up in your mind and thinking about what is said and shown versus what isn't?
Yeah, well, I had the advantage of actually having somebody in my life, my father, who would sort of coach me on those unspoken rules. So I got a lot of that in my youth. But what happened with Thomas was he came to me and he said, "Tell me what the rules are." And I mentioned something to him. I'm about to tell the audiences too. It was misinterpreted by somebody in one speech I gave, and they came up and said, "You're telling me that, it's about our appearance, not who we are at our heart and soul." And I said, no, that you're misinterpreting what I was trying to make the point of there. But what I told Thomas, and your listeners will understand this, why I'm telling this story in a second. Thomas comes to me, says, "What are the unspoken rules?" He didn't actually use that phrase, but he said, tell me how I can improve my promotability here in this office. And I said, all right, I'll tell you the things. HR would throw me out of here if they knew I was telling you this stuff. But the first thing is, don't wear those shirts. Those shirts look like bowling shirts. Nothing wrong with bowling, by the way. I'm not against bowling, but you don't wear that to this office. This office is a little more buttoned up than that. And so he said, "Thank you." And I said, "Yeah, don't tell anybody I told you that, because they'd toss me out of here. But the bottom line is that's the kind of thing I can coach you on," which I did, and it worked great for him. The reason it was misinterpreted by, again, it was just one person in a speech, was they thought I was saying it's all about how you look, not about your performance. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to look the part sometimes. And if you're gonna go in and not look the part in a company where there's a certain style of dress, you should say, if I want to fit in at this company, I'm going to have to learn how to dress that matches my authentic self along with what they expect. So
there has to be that balance. It's not that you have to give up completely who you are, but I think in any kind of relationship, whether it's one-to-one, person to person, or one to the company, it's like you got to meet each other halfway. So you have to understand what you can show, what you can't. It's not that you fully have to hide yourself, but at the same time, you have to consider, is this a company where I want to be judged by those things, or should I go find another company? But it's good that you gave them that perspective that you kind of have to read the room of where you are.
Yeah. Read the room is a great way to say it. It's just read the room and understand, the environment you're in. I sometimes use a parallel. If you're out on a date with somebody and you love football and you've been to 2 operas in your life, and the person you're going out on the date with says, "I hate football, but I love opera. Are you going to talk about football or are you going to talk about opera? You've
Yeah.
only been to two operas, but you're going to talk about opera because it's your job to try to read the room and go, okay, this is how I can build this bridge of commonality.
And is that person, him or her, in your eyes at that point worth, okay, maybe we'll talk about opera for a little bit. Maybe the experience with this person is worth me kind of extending my level of experience and exposure to opera or football the other way, whatever it
Yeah.
may be. But in real time, you have to consider what's at stake and what do I want to keep, or is it not worth it? I mean, easier
Yeah.
said than done, but those are the kind of things to consider. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And so, if the goal ultimately in relationships, whether it's at the office or at home, is to build a bridge of commonality, you find those common elements and you build the bridge that way. And then you introduce that person to football or they introduce you to more opera, whatever it is, but you've built that bridge of commonality. So it comes full circle to the story about Thomas, which was, hey, in order to build a bridge of commonality with the people here, and in order to have them sense that your intellect is every bit as great as your ability to connect with them, start dressing the part and learn how to dress the part that they're dressed in so that you can build that bridge. And then ultimately, when you're running the company, start wearing bowling shirts again. That's fine, but for now, as you're working your way up the chain of command, you're going to want to fit in a little bit better.
Where did that honesty come from in you, Jamie? I mean, you're a straight shooter from what I gather, from what I've heard from your life, but some people wouldn't share that. So where does that come from in you in terms of being honest with somebody when they ask such a question, giving them maybe a fluff answer versus giving them a real answer?
I'm gonna preface the answer with something that I hate to hear people say, but I'm going to say it to you because it's genuine.
Yeah.
Um, the thing I roll my eyes on is when people are being interviewed on TV or wherever, and they say, "Great question," because it's like everybody says that now. Just stop saying it. But that was a great question. So I appreciate it. I mean that genuinely, because you're going deep and you're saying, where does that come from? And I do know where it comes from. So point number one, great question. And I say that sincerely. Point number two is, if you think about who you are and what you're about, you have to go to your core essence. What is it that makes me me? What is it that drives me and motivates me? What is it that I need to do the way I need to breathe oxygen? And there are a list of things, and we can put it in the show notes that I've got a chart it's actually in the book.
Okay.
And it says, here's a column on the left of what are the core essences of being human. And some of us, our core essence is connecting with nature. Others is it's helping others. Others is it's understanding the universe. Others people's core essence is feeling supported, whatever it is. You come up with what that is. My core essence is the need and the desire to help others. And it's something that is innate and I was born with. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. And so when Thomas asked me that question, how do I work my way up the chain of command here? I thought I can give him the bullshit answer or I can give him the honest answer, which fulfills my need to help others and to see Thomas succeed. So I went in and gave him the real answer instead of giving him the work hard, kind of
Yeah.
answer. I was like, no, here's how it works. Here's how the world works.
Yeah, I appreciate that as somebody who tries to practice that, really trying to help people and not give them the fluff answer. Um, I hope I try to set up my relationships to build trust all along the way so that when a tough conversation or comment takes place like that people aren't used to, they realize that it's from a genuine place. It's not stepping out of line. It's not being condescending, whatever it may be. So I appreciate that. I wanted to dig a little more into what it was about you that allowed you to share honestly, that response to help him. Because if somebody had given him a fluff answer, I mean, he would have been walking around the building in circles, still wondering what he could have changed about himself.
Yeah.
sometimes it is tough medicine to hear certain things, but if the intention is authentic about helping that person, I think that comes through.
Yeah. And I hate to say this, but sometimes it is about the packaging and his his intellect was there, his drive was there. He just needed to put a different package on it so that they could see the intellect and the drive because they weren't able to get past the bowling shirt. And that was stopping them from fully appreciating him for everything that he was. And ultimately, he did figure it out and has had a successful career since then. So it all worked out in the end.
Jamie, I'm curious for you as the author of the book. Obviously, this is your wheelhouse, what your specialty is, what your life's work has led up to among the different books that the other books that you've written, which I want to ask you about as well. But in terms of this book, what changed in you? What evolved in you from this book coming out? What maybe changed based on writing these things out? Anything at all change in you in putting the book together?
Yeah. This is I think my fourth book. And part of the thing that happens when you write a book, and I would encourage anybody listening or watching this right now to consider writing a book because it forces you to organize your thoughts. We all have thoughts, ideas, all sorts of things floating around in our brain. But when you force your brain to organize it into a roadmap, that's a step-by-step process to help people accomplish what they want out of life. That is a hard task because it forces you to really think through, what do I know and how do I share it with others so that they pick up on what I know and can use this for themselves. And so it's a real hard process to do. And then combine that with the discipline of sitting down and writing a chapter of a book. A typical chapter is about 3,500 words. That's 15 to 20 typewritten pages. I can't remember. And that's hard,
Yeah.
and you're going along and you write a page and that took you 45 minutes and you're like, oh my God, I got 20 more of these to write. And that's just this one chapter, So it's very, very hard, but it does help you organize your thoughts and gets it down on paper. And then it can do it. Now, if you are somebody who's like, writing a book isn't for me, I'm going to encourage you to journal. And there's a new way of journaling that I've been doing lately that's been massively helpful. Again, I write all day long. So at the end of the day, the last thing I want to do is write,
Yeah.
But I do have thoughts and things that I want to express and get out because when you express something, you often can then handle it. And so I'm going to come back to something about how to handle anxiety because you mentioned that earlier, but there's a technique you may already be familiar with. But what I do now is I open up my notes app, I talk into it, I have a stream of consciousness, I say all these things, I blather on, and it's, 10, 15, 20 paragraphs, whatever it is. And then I shut it down and then I go back and I edit what I've written. So I fix the typos and I change things, but that forces me to reread it and it forces me to sort of process it. And so I see, I'm going to put a period here. I meant to do that here. And that little editing forces me to go back through and reread what I wrote. And that really seals it in my brain. So that is a technique that I'd encourage anybody to do if you don't want to hassle with writing a book. Try the journaling on the Notes app. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, any practice, any avenue, any application you can use to just kind of get your thoughts out of your head, whether it is an app, a recording, writing it down, whatever it may be, anything. I think it would encourage people just to kind of start that process of just thinking about their thinking and really getting it out of your head, not just sitting there thinking about your thoughts, but really committing them to something where, like you said, Jamie, you can review, go back, and it helps you kind of restructure your thinking or the way that you saw things. So I appreciate that. Jamie, I meant to ask you before diving into this book, could you go through the other books that you wrote and what led you to write those and what they were about?
Actually, yeah, I'll touch on each one of them.
Sure.
But there's a very important lesson that I learned in writing the first book. So I had come across the idea of affirmation statements. Are you familiar with affirmation statements?
Yes.
I am statements?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you write down 15 times a day, I am, and then you fill in the blank, and it's in present tense. I am, da 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 da. This is 20 years ago, true story. I came across that idea and I thought, all right, I think I'll try this technique, see what happens. I started writing down, I am an author who travels the globe helping others improve their lives. And I wrote that down 15 times every day. I'm an author who travels the globe helping others improve their lives. And at the time, I hadn't written a blog post. I hadn't written a white paper. I hadn't written an article. I definitely hadn't written a book. But because I was planting that affirmation in my brain was telling myself, you're an author. So fast forward about 6 months after I started writing this down, I had a friend of mine who said, oh, I have a friend who's an acquisition editor at a publisher, at a major publisher. Now my antenna were up because I'd been writing to myself every day.
Yeah.
I am an author. My antenna heard, I know somebody at a publisher. I was like, oh, well, can we meet with that person? And she said, yeah, sure. I can set you up with a lunch with them. So all three of us meet for lunch. And that's how writing that down ultimately turned into the very first book. First book was about social media. The second book was about mobile marketing. The third book was about another book on marketing. This fourth book is actually a departure because it's about learning how to do a better job leading yourself and having self-awareness so that you can engage with the world around you. So it's a departure in the sense that it's not a business book. It's really for anybody who is interested in learning how to achieve what they want out of life, whatever that may be.
Yeah, that's incredible. I know of affirmations. I've never done it as a practice, but even in moments where I need something like that, and I make the statement that I believe I need in that moment, even just that, even saying it out loud, looking in the mirror and saying it out loud does something.
I agree. And I have sorry, go ahead.
No, please. Because I'm curious again, not what people say in studies or anything like that, but what is your thought on that, Jamie? How do you put words to what is it that actually happens? How would you summarize that process and what it leads to?
It tunes your antenna to be aware of what life is putting in front of you. And here's what I mean by that. It's not magic. It's not woo-woo. What it is you are telling your brain, be on the lookout for things related to, in this particular case, writing books. And because my brain was tuned up to that, when my friend casually mentioned in passing, oh, I know somebody who works at a publisher, boom, I heard it. And I said, oh, my brain said, oh, you're an author. You've been telling yourself you're an author for 6 months. Here's somebody who knows a publisher or an acquisition editor at a publisher. And so that's how it all started. So it is not magic as much as it is really just tuning your brain to be on the lookout for things that you want in your life. My middle daughter, Grace, has a great affirmation that she writes down, which I love. And it is a simple one, and it's a great starting point for anybody who wants to do this. I am worthy. And it's basically saying, I am worthy of good things happening to me. I am worthy of positive things happening to me. I am worthy of resilience. I'm worthy of happiness. I'm worthy of all of that. And all you have to write down 15 times a day is, I am worthy. I am worthy. I am worthy. 3 words that'll change your life. So it's a great, very quick way to get into the world of affirmations. And it changes your perspective on things because you enter into the world with a belief that life is rigged in your favor, and if you can go through life thinking, if I just keep my eyes open, I'm going to see a lot of opportunity. I'm worthy of that opportunity. And it's a great one from my daughter. She taught it to me.
Yeah, that's incredible. When you first started talking about meditation way back when, an hour and 20 minutes ago, I pictured, because, they're teaching kids tools, resources for handling life in school, even at 5, 6, 7 years old, like identifying emotions, practices, affirmations, things like that. So there's more of that in the curriculum, depending on where you are, than we ever had. I mean, for me, it was just kind of like and information sharing in school, like learn this information, learn this information. There was nothing in school that helped you with tools and resources for how to do life. Not that it's
Yeah.
going to solve my kids' problems, but it puts them
Mhm.
on that path where it's like you have the agency to decide how you want to move through life. That it's not that we're going to give you all this information and education. You're going to get a job and life is just going to happen to you. There's agency that you have. Here's tools, whatever it may be, meditation, affirmations, whatever it may be. So it was incredible when you started talking about that. And I envisioned there've been times where I come around the corner in the house and my 6-year-old is just sitting there in a pose, like in his underwear after a shower, just meditating.
Wow.
They've done it like while we've been at the beach, like they'll climb up on a rock off by themselves and just sit there and just like,
Oh, that's amazing.
it's
That's so
incredible.
great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And man, that's a positive thing. Yeah, there is some reluctance in maybe more traditional parts of the country, and that's why I always start with it. All it is a mindset thing. It's not, it's not tapping into anything. Although actually, I think it is. But I try to demystify
Yeah.
it. Look,
Yes.
it's just
Yeah.
training your brain to, do things. There's also one thing that in terms of some of the emotions that people have, that's a technique that's great. And it just is basically name it to tame it. What happens with emotions is they bubble up in us. We don't
Oh,
understand.
yeah.
We don't know why they're there. But when we name them and say, I'm feeling anxiety, or I'm feeling depression, or I'm feeling happiness, or I'm feeling sadness, um, that is actually a great way to sort of tame it, because now you can put it into a box. You can't get rid of it. You can't throw the box away. You just have to say, okay, now it's in a box. Now I see it. Now I know what it is.
Exactly.
And there it is again, and then you can deal with it a little bit better.
Exactly. Jamie, what do you think? Not to rush you to your next writings, but is there a direction that you want to go in for your next book? Are you thinking in the future, anything else that you want to get to? Not giving away the store, but is there a general
Well,
theme or topic that you want to get to?
yeah, I love the idea of mindset, and how you change your thinking can change how you engage with the world. And I think there's an entire book behind that. In Better, a Guidebook to a New and Improved You, there's a story that I tell about how I was standing at an arcade machine, and this talks about mindset and how changing your mind can actually change the outcomes in your life. I'm playing a game. I have 3 quarters. I put 1 quarter in and I scored 15,000 points. Then I put a second quarter in and I scored 17,000 points. I'm getting ready to put the third quarter in. And my thinking is, okay, I've scored 15 on the first, 17 on the second. Maybe I'll hit 20 on this third go round. No sooner am I just about to put the third quarter in, a young girl taps me on my shoulder. True story. She says, mind if I step in? I say, sure, go ahead, step in. And I watch her. She scored not 25,000, not 30,000, not 35,000. She scored 55,000 points. And my mind went, oh my God, I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah.
So she leaves and I go up. Now I've got my third quarter. I put it in. Remember, I got 15, then 17. I thought I was going to hit 20. But now that my mind was opened up to the idea that 55,000 points was possible, I went in and kind of owned that machine and hit 45,000 points. So I went 15, 17, 45,000 because my mind was opened up to the idea that, oh, I can actually hit a higher number than I thought was possible. And so I share that as a way to say, if that's the kind of thing that you like and you want a roadmap on how to get that going on in your brain, check out the book. And then ultimately I'll write another book that'll be all about that stuff and dive deep onto that.
Incredible. Jamie, obviously we're here talking about your book today. What books stand out to you? What's been, when you come back for another conversation, I'd love to have you back on.
Sure.
What book would you bring to share from another author that's really made an impact or really stands out for you?
Long time ago, I read a book called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra, and it was a pivotal book in my life. It's very old now, but the fundamental premises in the book are all sound, and it basically just talks about here's how to move through life. It's a very short, quick, easy read. There's another one by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference.
Yep.
And a lot of the things that I write about in Better tap into Chris Voss's work, and I acknowledge that in the book. Chris Voss was a former FBI negotiator, and he talks about how to communicate better, how to deal with people, how to handle all of the things that we're talking about, including that idea of naming something as a way to sort of manage the stress around it. I think those two books are amazing. There's other books out there that I know I'll get back to my bedstand and go, darn, I should have mentioned this one too. Those are two that are amazing. I also happen to love history. So history actually brings me a sense of perspective, because I sit around and I think about what I'm worried about. And then I go, oh my God, the pioneers are going across the country in covered wagons and trying to fight off, people, Native Americans who were defending their land.
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. And so I'm like, okay, cool. This is really interesting. So if you want perspective on how easy our lives are, read history. If you want to figure out how to get to the next level, the Chris Voss book, Never Split the Difference, and the Deepak Chopra book, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, might be good starting points for you after you read mine.
Of course. Absolutely. Jamie, and then in wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything else that you want to share that maybe I didn't ask, we didn't get to cover, anything at all? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. If you're interested in sort of self-assessment quizzes, you can go to UnspokenRules.Live. So that's UnspokenRules.Live. And scroll down on the first page and you'll see 2 links there. One for a superpowers quiz that'll help you understand what your strengths are. And the second is a communication skills quiz, which will help you understand the best ways to communicate. And those 2 links are great little quizzes that you can tap into and actually use in order to figure out who you are and how to do a better job leading yourself and leading those around you.
Yeah, and I'll include all the links for your books, those resources that you mentioned in the show notes when I publish this. Again, Jamie shared his book, Better, a guidebook to a new and improved you. Jamie, thank you so much for your time, the stories, everything that you shared in the last hour and a half with you.
Thanks a lot. Glad to be here. I appreciate all the great questions, and I'll catch up with you next time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. More than invited. It's always open. And if there's anything that I might have missed, please let me know. There's so much to cover, so little time. I can reach out to Jamie, see what kind of additional guidance, insights, wisdom, any of it I can get back. In the meantime, thank you for watching, listening, and subscribing, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.